معرفة.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. So now let's talk about Sukuk assets. Now this is a very important topic because, as we said, there is a difference between a bond and a Sukuk, and one of the major differences is that in bonds there is no asset, underlying asset, but in Sukuk there is an asset. So whenever a sovereign or a corporate wants to issue a Sukuk, one of the main discussions which happens is discussions surrounding assets. And in my past experience, I have seen this while in discussions with the sovereign of Egypt, for example, Egypt government, whether it is when discussions with the sovereign of Malaysia, or in discussions with the sovereign of Indonesia, or in discussions with the sovereign of Philippines. So whenever we were speaking with these sovereigns, one of the main concerns which comes is with regards to assets. And a bulk of discussions and bulk of engagement of lawyers and Sharia scholars surrounds around assets. And the same way goes with the corporates. When we were talking with, for example, with Emirates Airlines, discussion was about assets. When we were talking with Tenaga National, which is an electricity company of Malaysia, it was about assets. When we were in discussions with Petronas, about assets. When we were discussing with multiple corporates. So asset become one of the main discussion, most of the issuers, and even now with regards to this new standards which has come from IOFI, one of the main discussions is about assets. So it's very important for you to understand what kind of assets, what assets are involved in Sukuk, and what has been done in the past, what are the Sharia requirements, what are the legal challenges, and so on and so forth. So now let us understand here the definition of Sukuk, right? And we are here referring to the IOFI standard 62511, how the assets are defined there. The underlying assets of Sukuk may consist of tangible assets, usufructs, services, rights, cash or debts, whether held individually or in combination through commingling, right? And the Arabic word for commingling here is khulta, right? So this is in a nutshell different types of assets, right? So let us first understand tangible assets, right? Tangible meaning to say something you can hold, right? Something you can feel. That is what tangible assets are. Now these tangible assets could be real estate assets or operating assets, right? Now these tangible assets could be, for example, generally when we talk to people, these tangible assets are mainly real estate assets, right? Now these real estate assets in the past could be buildings. For example, when we were doing Sukuk for the government of Malaysia, we were talking about hospital buildings, right? There were 70 hospital buildings which were used as assets. When we were discussing with the sovereign of Pakistan, we were talking about the roads, right? The highways to be used as the underlying assets. When we were discussing with the sovereign of Bahrain, these were plots of lands which were used as the underlying assets. Then when we were talking with the sovereign of Indonesia, again these were huge tracts of land which they have used as the underlying assets. So these are real estate assets which are in the form of land, development lands, or they are buildings in infrastructure. Intangible assets, many a times we also use plant and equipment. So I will here mention about the discussions which we had with Petronas, right? So in oil and gas industry, there are a lot of plant equipment, right? Machineries, right? So these plant and equipment were also used as the underlying assets multiple times. Now talk about intangible assets. Now intangible assets could be, for example, again multiple, which could be like a copyright, right? A goodwill, right? These have value. So we have to understand in Sukuk, the asset needs to have value. So that is, these goodwill and copyrights have value and they represent an ownership, and hence they can be used as an asset. Now let us understand what the asset must possess, right? So that it could be classified as an asset which could be used to structure a Sukuk. So an asset must possess a recognizable and measurable value, right? That is the first thing, recognizable, measurable value. The second thing is that the asset must be legally transferable. So because the whole objective here is that you are selling this asset. So from a legal point of view, this asset can be legally transferable from the seller to the buyer. That is important. So recognizable and measurable. Second point is legally transferable. The third point is that the asset must be free from any encumbrances. What it means is that the asset cannot have any encumbrance, meaning to say that asset should not already be sold to somebody, it should not be in the ownership of somebody, it should not be used as a lien for any other financing or a security for any other financing. It should be completely free, and it should be in a position to be transferred from the seller to the buyer, right? So that needs to be fulfilled, and it needs to be having some value, and it should be measurable. So these are some of the main points which we need to emphasize. At the time of when we were discussing of intangible assets, there are some rights and services, right, which we have used in the past to structure a sukuk. So as I said, there are multiple corporates. When we discuss with them, they have a challenge with regards to asset. So I'll start with the discussions which we had with DP World, for example. It's a huge port company in UAE, and they said that what is it that we can use as an asset in our structuring of the sukuk. So in the port industry, there is a very important service which the port industry provides, and there is a economic value to this, right? And this value can be transferable, right? And what it is defined as, this is defined as a throughput services, right? This is basically because at the end of the day, the port industry is a service industry. And what is the service they provide? There are certain services which they provide, and against those services they charge the fee to the customer. So this service basically are certain throughput rights and services for container handling at various terminals owned or operated by the company in the UAE. So this is how the throughput services were defined in the sukuk which was structured. So what is it? The services: lifting containers on and off from the vessels. One of the service which the port plays, for which it charges, is to lift these containers from the vessels and to the port, right? This is one service, and this is having a value. Then again, storing these containers in the relevant group terminals. This is the second service, right? And the third important service is facilitating the delivery and the receipt of containers, right? So these are three main services which the port industry provides, and against this service they charge a money or fee, right? From the company. So they said these are the services, they have a value, and can we transfer these services as an asset to the SPV, right? A lot of discussion, deliberation was done both with the Sharia scholars, because it's very important for Sharia scholars to sign this as an approved asset class, right? And after a lot of deliberations with the Sharia scholars, this was approved as a Sharia compliant asset. Then from a legal perspective, the discussion was initiated that can this asset be legally transferred from the issuer, in this case for example was DP World, to the SPV, right? And then it was said yes, it could be transferred. So that is how this asset class, an intangible asset class in the form of rights and services, because it ticked all the three boxes, meaning to say it was measurable, it had a value, it was legally transferable, and it also recognized as an asset, right? Now let us look at the second rights and services asset. When we were talking with Emirates Airlines, again Emirates Airlines, after its first issuance where they had used tangible assets, which is the real estate assets, then they said now we don't want to use tangible assets, right? Because that would block our asset in the structure of the sukuk. So now what we can use? So the right to travel, right? You see, at the end of the day, what is the service which the airlines provide? There is a service which the airline provides, which is basically called as ATKMs. This is again what is ATKM? Basically, this is the cargo and the passenger capacity, right? Each airlines is assigned a particular cargo and also passenger capacity. And against that passenger capacity and the cargo capacity, there is a value which is entitled. So if there is a particular flight, right, or an aircraft which flies, for example, from Mumbai to Dubai, or in 1 year, for example, it travels 200 times, right? So how they measure the economic value is that for the travel, what would be the average capacity of the passengers, what would be the ticket value, okay, over a period of 1 year, and at the same time, what could be the cargo which this flight would carry from Mumbai to Delhi, for example, or Mumbai to Dubai, for example. That value is basically an economic value. Now let us see how this was defined in the prospectus of this Emirates Airlines Sukuk. So right to travel was meant certain rights and services acquired by the trustee in accordance with the purchase services agreement, comprising the following. Let us understand how this right to travel is defined. The right to travel, right, is basically defined as the right to travel in any airline passenger route operated from time to time by Emirates. Okay, now this was the right to travel. All services ordinarily provided by Emirates to passengers traveling on such route, except for any services relating to sale of alcohol, pork or tobacco related products. As I was mentioning with regards to Emirates Airlines, the assets which were used were ATKMs, right? The right to services. And as I said, each aircraft is measured by its capacity, and this capacity with regards to passengers and cargo, and both these capacities brings a revenue to the airline. So that was the ATKMs, which is defined as available ton kilometers, measures an airline's total capacity to cargo and passengers. Now let's look at the second. When we were talking to Tenaga National, which is an electricity producing company in Malaysia, now the asset which they had or they wanted to use and how they defined the right to services was the right to participate in the supply of electricity in Malaysia, the right to operate and maintain certain installation in connection with the supply of electricity in Malaysia, and the right to receive all revenues, distributions and other monies at any time payable in respect of the services. So these were the certain rights which were very exclusive with this electricity producing company with regards to the supply, with regards to the collection of the revenue. So these rights were again transferred as an asset because it classified as an asset, it had a value, it was recognizable, it was transferable, it was Sharia compliant. So this is how again an intangible asset, rights and services, was used as an asset class to structure a sukuk. Now let's look at the another right to services. When the sovereign of Malaysia was issuing one of their recent past sukuk, now they said that again what is an intangible asset class which we can use. So here they use the right to participate in the issuance of driving in vehicle license and the provision of transfer of the vehicle ownership services and the other vehicle registration services in Malaysia, right? So this was an exclusive right again with the government which had a revenue generation capacity in these rights, and these rights were transferred. And then the right to receive all revenues, distributions and other monies at any time payable in respect of the services as set out above. Meaning to say that these licensing activity had a revenue stream linked or attached to it. So that's the reason one of the again important aspects of any asset is that it has to be revenue generating, it has to have a legal recognition, it can be transferable, it should be Sharia compliant. And all these aspects were ticked off from this asset class as well. So I have covered here some of the intangible assets, right, which were used by various sovereigns and the corporates for the issuance of their sukuk. So one, we covered the tangible piece. In the tangible piece, we talked about the real estate. We talked about real estate including land and buildings, and we also talked about the plant and equipment. Now let's discuss about another asset class, and which is again a very important asset class. So when a lot of telecommunication companies wanted to issue sukuk, right, and as we know, asset class for them is only the telecommunication network and the revenue which they receive, right, from this telecommunication network is by selling the airtime to clients and customers. So one of the sukuk which was issued by one of the leading telecommunication company in Qatar, Ooredoo, right, it's a mobile telecommunication company. When they approached the issuers with regards to how they can use this asset class to issue a sukuk, then again there was a due diligence done, and there was basically an airtime voucher created, right? Because this airtime has a recognizable value and this airtime is sold as an asset at the end of the day as a service to the end consumers, which is the customers, and this has a revenue stream. So these airtime was used as an asset class by Ooredoo, which is a telecommunication company, to raise sukuk. Most of these companies, right, who wanted to use an alternative asset class in terms of intangibles, which were the rights and services, had successfully used this in various formats, be it, for example, electricity company, I discussed about it, airlines industry, we discussed about it, telecommunication company, right, how they have used the airtime in terms of an asset class to raise liquidity. Here, let us talk about the two things which we have not touched much about the usufruct, right? The usufruct is basically defined in the Arabic terminology as manfa. Manfa meaning the benefit. So meaning to say every asset has a benefit. The usufruct was used again for the issuance of sukuks in the form of the leasehold interest. So there were multiple sukuks, especially by sovereigns. When the first issuance was done by the sovereign of the Bahrain, what was done was the manfa, that is the leasehold interest, was used as, so there was a long lease of 99 years, okay, which was transferred, okay, to the SPV, and then there was a short lease, sublease for 5 years for the value, for the tenor of the sukuk. And again, Indonesia had used it, and recently, for example, the Egyptian sovereign has used it. So basically the structure is a head lease and a sublease. So what you transfer as an asset is the usufruct. What is usufruct? Usufruct is nothing but the benefit of the asset. To give you a simple example, it's like leasing a house. So if you are leasing a house, you're not selling a house, you are selling the benefit of the house, meaning to say the lease of the house. So if you lease a house to a person for a year, the person would pay you for the usage of the house, but the ownership remains with you, and after 1 year he will go out of the house. So in the same way, that manfa or the benefit was transferred as an asset class to the SPV, and then it was leased back. So this is another asset class. And the last asset class which is mentioned is about debt, right? So debt meaning to say, if there is a murabaha sukuk, for example, right, debt is created, meaning to say, so that debt can also become as an asset in the pool, okay? So if you are selling a murabaha receivable to an SPV in a combination of with other things, so that receivable basically also becomes an asset in a pool. So these are different types of assets. So we have covered tangible, intangible, we have covered rights and services, we have covered usufruct, we have covered debt. So in a nutshell, these are different varieties of assets which have been used as assets in sukuks.
معرفة